The dust swirled in lazy devils across Main Street as Eliza Whitmore stepped down from the stagecoach, her traveling dress already coated in the fine red powder that seemed to cling to everything in this forsaken corner of the Arizona Territory. She was only 19, but the way she carried herself, straight-backed and proud, made men stop what they were doing and stare. Her golden hair caught the desert sun, her blue eyes sharp as a prairie sky, too clean and too fine for a place like Cedar Ridge. The year was 1889, and Cedar Ridge sat like a scar at the foot of the Superstition Mountains. The town was half dust, half sin, its wooden buildings sun-bleached and warped, its air filled with the sound of hammering from the blacksmith, the rattle of wagon wheels, and laughter spilling out of saloon doors. "Miss Whitmore." The voice came from behind her. Josiah Harrington, owner of half the land and all the trouble in Cedar Ridge, stepped forward with a smile that made her stomach turn. He was 50 if he was a day, gray whiskers, soft hands, and eyes that gleamed like polished coal. His fine clothes couldn't hide what he was, a man who bought what he wanted and didn't take no for an answer. "Your father said you'd be arriving today," he said, his voice too smooth. Eliza curtsied out of habit, though every part of her wanted to recoil. "Yes, Mr. Harrington." "Soon enough, you'll be calling me Josiah." His grin widened as his hand reached for her elbow. "Or perhaps something more intimate." She stepped back quickly, pretending to adjust her bonnet. "Where is my father?" "Attending to business," Harrington said with a smirk. "He owes me a great deal, but you needn't worry your pretty head about that. You'll have plenty to do learning to run my household." That night, the truth came out over a supper of beans and cornbread. Samuel Whitmore, once a proud Boston merchant, was now a broken man, his fine coat shiny with wear, his eyes dulled by whiskey and failure. "You'll marry him," he said flatly, not meeting her gaze. "It's the only way to clear my debts. You'll be cared for. You'll be respectable." "Respectable?" Eliza's voice trembled with disbelief. "He's old enough to be my father. You're selling me, Papa, like a horse at auction." The slap came hard and fast, burning her cheek. "Enough! You'll do as you're told. We're not in Boston anymore. Out here, a woman does what she must to survive." Her eyes stung with tears. "And what of love?" Her father laughed bitterly. "Love? That's a luxury for fools." That night, Eliza lay awake on her narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. From the street below drifted the sound of a piano and drunken laughter. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, a lonely, haunting cry that echoed how she felt inside. She pressed her palm to the window pane, watching the desert swallow the last of the sunlight. Somewhere out there was freedom and death. Both seemed kinder than the life being forced upon her. The next morning brought something new. A group of Apache prisoners were marched through town under heavy guard. Women and children, their wrists bound with rope. The townsfolk gathered to jeer and spit. Eliza stood on the boarding house porch, sickened by what she saw. "Savages," muttered Mrs. Brewster, the landlady beside her. "Should have killed them all years ago." One of the soldiers shoved a young Apache woman hard enough to make her stumble. Her little boy cried out, and without thinking, Eliza took a step forward. Her father's hand gripped her arm like iron. "Don't even think about it," he hissed. "You want folks calling you an Indian lover? That's worse than being a fallen woman." Eliza's throat ached with words she couldn't say. She watched until the prisoners disappeared down the road, swallowed by dust. That afternoon, while her father was at the bank, she wandered through town, looking for some kind of escape. The desert stretched endlessly on all sides, cruel and beautiful. The sky was heavy with storm clouds, strange, green-tinged, and rolling fast from the mountains. By dusk, the first winds hit. Windows rattled. Horses screamed in their stalls. The air turned to sand. A haboob, a wall of dust taller than the church steeple, charged toward the town like a beast. Eliza stood at her window, her heart pounding. The storm was chaos and freedom all at once. As the first sand struck the glass like hail, she made her decision. She packed a small bag, a canteen, a few biscuits, matches, and her father's forgotten pistol. She wrapped her shawl tight and slipped down the back stairs as the boarding house erupted with shouts. The storm swallowed her whole. The sand tore at her clothes, burned her skin, filled her mouth and eyes. She couldn't see 3 feet ahead, but she kept walking. Better to die in the desert than live as a bought bride. Time disappeared. The world was only wind and pain and determination. Finally, her strength gave out. She collapsed behind a boulder, curling into herself, whispering a prayer she couldn't finish. The storm roared over her like the end of the world. When she opened her eyes, everything was quiet. She was lying on a bed of soft hides, firelight flickering against stone walls. The air smelled of smoke and sage. A voice spoke, a low, calm voice, strange but gentle. "No move," it said. "You safe." She turned her head slowly. A man crouched near the fire. His skin was bronze, his hair black and long, his face sharp and beautiful in a way that frightened her. "Where am I?" Her throat was raw. "Storm bring you," he said simply. "I find. Bring here." He handed her a gourd of water, watching her carefully as she drank. "You're Apache," she whispered. He nodded once. "Americans call me Thomas. My people call me Kuruk, means bear." Eliza's heart pounded. The stories she'd heard in town came rushing back, of raids, of savagery. But the man before her looked nothing like the monster she'd been taught to fear. His eyes held no cruelty, only quiet strength. "Why did you save me?" she asked. Kuruk stirred the fire, his movements deliberate. "Because storm kills foolish white girl in desert. And he paused, searching for words. "Do not like death when it can be stopped." Eliza stared at him, realizing that her life now rested in the hands of the very kind of man her town called enemy. Outside, the storm died away, leaving only silence and the steady sound of her own heartbeat. And for the first time since she'd stepped off the stagecoach, Eliza Whitmore didn't feel afraid, only uncertain of what tomorrow would bring. When morning came, the cave was filled with pale light that turned the walls gold. Eliza woke to the sound of water dripping into a small pool. Her body ached from exhaustion, but she was alive. She looked toward the fire where Kuruk crouched, grinding something in a wooden bowl. He turned when he felt her eyes on him. "You wake," he said simply. "Good." She tried to sit up, wincing as her muscles protested. "How long was I asleep?" "2 nights," he replied. "Storm strong. You fever." He brought her a small clay cup. The liquid smelled bitter, like herbs. "Drink. Help strength." She hesitated, but the calm in his eyes made her trust him. The drink burned slightly on her tongue, then warmth spread through her limbs. Her gaze moved to her things. Her pistol, her shawl, her small bag, all neatly placed near the fire. "You didn't take anything," she said softly. Kuruk raised an eyebrow. "Take? Why? I am not thief." Eliza flushed. "No, of course not. It's just in town, they said." He cut her off with a small smile. "In town, they say Apache are monsters. Kill for sport, steal for pleasure. But truth not live in town." She fell quiet, studying him. He moved with quiet grace, every action deliberate. His hands were scarred but gentle, his posture proud. He reminded her of the hawks that soared over the desert, wild, untamed, and watchful. When she'd eaten the simple stew he offered, she asked, "What happens now? Will you take me back?" His expression changed, shadowed with something unreadable. "Back to men who sell you like horse? No, but you cannot stay, my people gone. I live alone, desert not kind to strangers." "Then, teach me," she said suddenly. He looked up sharply. "Teach you?" "How to live here. How to survive." She met his gaze without flinching. "If I go back, I'll die anyway, inside if not outside." He studied her for a long time. Finally, he nodded once. 3 days. I teach what I can. After that, you choose." Those 3 days stretched into a week. Each morning, the desert greeted them with blazing light and endless silence. Kuruk showed her how to read the ground for tracks, how to dig for hidden water under dry riverbeds, how to strip thorns from cactus pads and roast them for food. She learned which plants healed burns, which could poison. "You watch too fast," he said one morning as she rushed to mimic his movements. "Desert, not hurry. You listen, feel, then act." By evening, her hands were blistered, her skin burned bronze, her Boston softness replaced by something stronger. At night, they sat by the fire. He told her stories of the old world, the time before soldiers and fences, when his people roamed free. "Your people think land can be owned," he said, stirring the coals. "But Apache know we belong to land, not other way." Eliza listened, fascinated. The world he described was harsh but beautiful, ruled by respect instead of greed. "Your English is very good," she said one night. He smiled faintly. "Army prison, 2 winters. Learned their tongue to understand enemy." He touched his ribs, where a long scar ran. "Freedom has price." Something in his tone made her chest ache. "And your family?" He was silent for a long time. Then, in a voice rough as gravel, he said, "Gone. Soldiers came to winter camp. Burned all, mother, sister, woman I would marry. I was away hunting. Came back to smoke and ashes." The pain in his words cut through her. Without thinking, she reached across the fire and touched his hand. He froze. Her skin against his was pale, trembling. His eyes lifted to hers, full of surprise and something else. "This cannot be," he said quietly. "Your people and mine." "My people," she whispered bitterly, "sold me like cattle. What do I owe them?" Quote. The air between them thickened. The fire popped softly, throwing shifting light across their faces. Kuruk stood abruptly, moving toward the cave mouth. "Sleep now," he said gruffly. "We leave at dawn." But Eliza lay awake long after, staring at the flickering shadows. She could still feel the warmth of his hand, the electricity of that single touch. The next morning, the desert was quiet, washed clean by the storm that had ended her old life. They packed supplies and started toward the mountains where he said she would be safer. The sun rose behind them, painting the land in red and gold. They walked for hours without speaking. Finally, she broke the silence. "Why do you live alone?" He didn't look at her. "My people scattered, some in Mexico, some dead. I stay here to remember." "To remember?" He nodded. "If I leave, memories die too." When they stopped to rest under a mesquite tree, she asked softly, "Do you ever get lonely?" His dark eyes met hers. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but loneliness better than hate." She understood that. She'd felt lonely even in a crowded room her whole life, especially after her mother died. That night, they camped near a canyon where the stars seemed close enough to touch. Kuruk pointed out constellations, telling her the Apache names for each one. "That one," he said, pointing to a bright star near the horizon. "We call Naba. Means brave woman who walks alone." "Like me?" she teased gently. He smiled faintly. "Maybe." A coyote howled in the distance and she shivered. He stirred the fire and said quietly, "Coyote, not enemy. Trickster, teacher. He show fools how to survive." The fire crackled, throwing gold across his face. She realized how close they were sitting. The air felt thick with unspoken things. "Kuruk," she said softly, "what does my name mean in your language?" He thought for a moment. "Eliza, no word same, but if I give one, I call you Nashoba, spirit that walks between storms." Her heart fluttered. "And what does yours mean again?" "Bear," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "Strong but careful, fights only when must." Silence stretched between them. Then she whispered, "Kuruk, thank you for saving me, for teaching me." He looked at her for a long time. "You learn quick, too quick. Desert change you fast." "Maybe it's not changing me," she said. "Maybe it's showing who I was meant to be." Quote, That night, she dreamed of the storm again. But this time, instead of running, she stood still in its heart, and Kuruk's hand reached through the wind to find hers. When she woke before dawn, she found him already awake, watching the sunrise. His profile against the firelight looked carved from the mountain itself. He turned slightly, sensing her gaze. "Time to go," he said. "Where?" He looked toward the distant peaks. "To Sacred Place, safe for now, but if men from town come—" "Then what?" she asked. He met her eyes, calm and steady. "Then we fight." And for the first time in her life, Eliza Whitmore did not feel afraid of what lay ahead. They traveled for 2 days through the high canyons, where red rock walls rose like cathedrals. The air was cooler here, and at night the stars burned brighter than she had ever seen. Kuruk moved with quiet purpose, guiding her along hidden paths only he seemed to know. When she stumbled, he steadied her with a light touch that lingered longer each time. At last they reached a narrow valley guarded by towering pines and a ribbon of clear water running through smooth stone. "Gone Canyon," he said softly, "sacred to my people. Mountain spirits dance here. No white has entered and lived." Eliza looked around in wonder. Sunlight poured through the trees in golden shafts, and the air carried the scent of pine and wild sage. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He nodded, his gaze distant. It was home once, long ago. They built a small camp near the waterfall. Kuruk hunted rabbits and trout, while Eliza gathered berries and learned to weave grasses into mats. She worked hard, her hands blistered and raw, but each new skill filled her with a strange pride. The Boston girl who once flinched at dust was gone. The woman who replaced her moved barefoot through the wild without fear. Some evenings, Kuruk told stories around the fire. He spoke of Spider-Woman who wove the world, of the twins who fought monsters, of how the first people learned to live with the land instead of over it. She listened, her heart swelling with a peace she'd never known. One night, as he finished a story, silence settled between them. The fire crackled, and a soft wind stirred the pines. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked quietly. His eyes reflected the flames. "I do not know. Maybe spirits wanted it. Maybe I wanted it." She met his gaze. "And now?" He hesitated, then said, "Now I try not to want what I cannot have." The words cut deeper than she expected. "And what is that?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "You." The sound of her name on his tongue made her breath catch. She moved closer, heart pounding. "You saved my life. You taught me to survive. You gave me freedom. How can that be something you can't have?" He stood abruptly, walking to the edge of the firelight. "Because your people would hang me for touching you. Because my own would curse me for letting you stay." She rose too, stepping closer until she could see the pain in his eyes. "Then let them curse us both," she said. "I'm done living by other people's rules." Quote. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched her cheek. His calloused fingers were warm against her skin. "Will it hurt?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear and something far more dangerous. "Only if you fear what is true," he said gently. The distance between them vanished. His lips brushed hers, hesitant at first, then deepening as if the world had been waiting for this moment. The firelight painted their shadows across the cave wall, two souls from different worlds, finally finding the same heartbeat. When dawn came, the world seemed new. She woke beside him, his arm draped protectively over her. The guilt she expected never came. Only peace, only belonging. But peace on the frontier never lasted long. That afternoon, the echo of horses shattered the stillness. Kuruk tensed instantly, motioning for silence. Voices followed, men's voices, angry and close. "Eliza Whitmore," someone shouted. "By order of the territory, you're to come out now." Her blood turned to ice. It was Jake Morrison, Harrington's foreman. Kuruk moved like a shadow, pulling her into a narrow crevice behind the waterfall. "Stay," he whispered. Through the thin sheet of water, she saw riders dismount, their rifles glinting in the sun. Her father was among them, his face pale and drawn. "Please," he shouted. "Just come home, Eliza, before they do something we can't undo." Before she could stop herself, she stepped into the open. "I'm not your property," she cried, her voice echoing across the canyon. "You sold me once. You won't do it again." "Get away from her," Morrison snarled, raising his gun as Kuruk appeared beside her. The shot rang out. Kuruk jerked backward, blood blooming red on his shoulder. "No!" Eliza screamed, running to him. She pressed her hands to the wound, but he pushed her away. "Go!" he gasped. "They kill you, too." But she wouldn't move. "Not without you." The soldiers hesitated, uneasy at the sight of a white woman cradling an Apache in her arms. Then a shout came from the cliffs above. A half-dozen Apache warriors emerged, bows drawn, faces painted. An older man with gray braids stepped forward. His voice boomed through the canyon. "You leave now, or more blood comes." The soldiers froze. Even Morrison lowered his gun. The elder looked at Eliza. "White woman stand with Apache. She choose this path?" Eliza raised her chin. "I do." He nodded once. "Then she, one of us." Her father's voice broke. "Eliza, please, think of what you're doing." She looked at him for a long moment, tears cutting clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. "I am thinking, Father, for the first time in my life." The soldiers withdrew under the elder's command. The sound of their retreat echoed down the canyon until it faded into silence. Eliza turned back to Kuruk, who leaned weakly against the stone. "You should have let me fight," he murmured. "And leave me to face this alone?" She said softly, "Never." Days passed. Under the elder's care, Kuruk healed. The Apache accepted her slowly, seeing her loyalty was true. She helped grind herbs, tend fires, and care for the wounded. One night, beneath a canopy of stars, Kuruk took her hands in his. "You could still go back," he said. "Find easier life." She shook her head. "I found my life." He smiled, that rare, quiet smile that made her heart ache. "Then I give you Apache name. Nonia, spirit who stands in storm." "And you," she whispered. He touched the scar on his shoulder. "I am bear who walks beside spirit." She leaned in and kissed him, sealing the promise with warmth instead of words. Seasons passed. Together they built a small home in the canyon. Sometimes soldiers passed nearby, but none dared enter sacred ground. Rumors spread through the territory about the white woman who lived with an Apache warrior. Some said she'd been bewitched. Others said she was dead. In truth, she was more alive than ever. Years later, when their child was born, a daughter with hair like sunlight and eyes like midnight, Eliza whispered to the tiny bundle, "You are proof the world can change." Kuruk smiled faintly. "She will walk between both worlds, as we do." The wind sighed through the canyon, carrying the scent of sage and rain. The firelight danced on their faces, on the child's small hand reaching toward the sky. And for the first time in all the harsh, beautiful history of that land, two worlds, once divided by hatred, began to heal, one heartbeat at a time.